Good afternoon. My name is Brian Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization and the Director of the National Energy Technology Laboratory. And I thank those of you who are joining this afternoon to learn about our new clearinghouse from the Interagency Working Group. And I'm going to pause and give a few attendees I see still logging on a few more moments before we begin in earnest and start our program this afternoon. Good afternoon. I see 2:02 on my clock, and to repeat myself, I'm Brian Anderson, the Director of the National Energy Technology Laboratory and the Executive Director of the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities. And thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon about our clearinghouse for federal funding opportunities for energy communities, how to use it and what's available. And I hope that the next 50 minutes or so is informative, but also insightful into some of the approaches that we're trying to take into tackling economic revitalization across the country and focusing on our energy communities. Today marks the one-year anniversary of Executive Order 14008, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And in Section 218 of the Executive Order was the establishment of the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization. Those of you who have joined us in previous webinars are quite familiar with standing up of the Interagency Working Group, but even backing up, just giving honor to the Executive Order. Backing up to Section 217 was how we empower workers through revitalizing energy communities and in establishing the Interagency Working Group across the Department of Treasury, Interior, Ag, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, Transportation, Energy, Education, the EPA, the Office of Management and Budget, the White House, and a number of colleagues across the entire federal government, focusing specifically on how we can ensure that the resources of the federal government are creating the types of impacts in communities around the country that we want to see. We want to see vital economies that are diverse and sustainable into the future. And so we spent the better part of the last year, starting with writing the report for the president in the first 60 days after the signing of the executive order, and then over the last 10 months, working with communities all across the country, learning about how we can best support you in your economic endeavors. And certainly in the fall, with the release of the EDA's funds and the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, and as well as other funding opportunities that you'll learn some highlights of today, our job is to make sure that the tools are in the hands of those practitioners and community partners, local governments and state governments, to be able to find, access, and apply to, and then ultimately receive the types of federal funding that will create the economic revitalization. One big piece of the approach we're taking is to drive toward a one-stop shop for those energy communities around the country who are looking for the federal resources. And today we're talking about our clearinghouse, which is the first step in driving toward this one-stop shop. And you'll see the clearinghouse is an amalgamation of the menagerie of federal funding opportunities across the 11 agencies in the Interagency Working Group that can be accessed today and into the future. And it really is amazing the amount of funding, as well as the variety in programs. And so as we continue to work and refine on the Clearinghouse and driving toward the one-stop shop, we will continue stakeholder engagement in communities like yours, of those folks who are joining, as well as we will be continuously soliciting feedback on how we can do better. Because one of the early challenges that we set for ourselves, and this goes back to some early stakeholder engagement, is how we can be innovative in the federal government and the way we do business. And so not only are we trying to make sure that the barrier to accessing federal resources is lowered from the federal side, that we do intensive coordination and integration of our federal resources to where we can put the pieces of the puzzle together on the federal side, making the job easier for those in the private sector and in local and regional and state governments to be able to put the pieces of economic revitalization together. And so, again, I'm going to quickly pass it to Briggs White, the Deputy Executive Director, also an employee at NETL, and we'll go on with today. But again, welcome, and thank you for your interest. Thank you for your engagement. And I'm going to give the thank you in advance for listening to what the direction we're going with the Clearinghouse and providing feedback to us so we can continuously make it the tool that we want it to be for you in the communities around the country. So Briggs, thanks for putting together this workshop today, and I'll pass it over to you again. Briggs White, Deputy Executive Director of the Interagency Working Group.
Hey, thank you, Brian, and thanks to all of our attendees. We're really excited to share this clearinghouse of funding opportunities with you. I'm going to do a brief overview of what's in the tool, and then we'll jump into some discussion with representatives from two of the agencies from USDA and EDA that have some open funding opportunities that you can actually apply to right now, just to really tease out as examples of the breadth of the tool. But really, we have funding opportunities in there either that have already closed or currently opened or will be opened in the future from 11 agencies, and just really excited to share that with you. And then we'll go to some closing remarks from Brian, and he'll even share a look forward with you, so stay around. Let's do a poll question. This is entirely optional, but just to get a sense of the crowd, let us know, have you ever applied to a federal funding opportunity? Love to hear thoughts in terms of moving forward in the chat. Barriers you've encountered or opportunities where we can do better to assist you. So have you ever submitted an application for federal funding? Let us know. Why don't we go ahead and move on and take a look at just a few housekeeping slides. First of all, everybody's muted for this, but feel free to send in questions for the panelists in the chat. So I'll be happy to moderate those towards the end, and we can have a bit of a discussion. This is being recorded, and if you have any technical questions, when you put it in the chat, send it to the host, and they'll help you out. Next slide, please. Important reminder, all the slides, the webinar recording, and any associated resources will be posted to the energycommunities.gov website, and we'll send a follow-up email. So if you already registered for this, you don't have to do a thing. You're going to receive it in an email, or if you want to pass it along to a colleague. But those resources will be available in case somebody didn't have a chance to attend and you want to let them know. Let's see the results of that poll. Do we have that? So looks like a decent number of folks yes, and a decent number of folks no. So good for us to be aware of that, and thank you for participating in that. We'll have a few more interactive items towards the end. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So just one or two slides on the overview, and then we'll get into a little more of the nuts and bolts. The funding opportunity has over $46 billion, the Clearinghouse has over $46 billion worth of either currently opened funding opportunities or ones that are planned to be open in the near future by the federal agencies. You can see to the top right a table where if you were on the website, you would be able to scroll through the various opportunities. You can sort them in various ways to find either what kind of opportunity you're looking for, say it's support for infrastructure, economic development, a particular agency, whether or not there's a match or not, and so on. 66 currently open or planned opportunities. And in fact, we highlighted down in the bottom, there's going to be 4 opportunities open in the next 60 days that'll be coming online. So if you've already registered, we'll be sending out a newsletter periodically. We can give you an update, or you can just check back to the website, or of course, reach out to the agencies directly. 12 agencies represented. Of the funding opportunities, really importantly, 21 of those have no cost share requirements. So for those folks that have a difficulty pulling together the cost share, 21 of them out there with no cost share requirements. So check it out if you're interested. You can screen on that under the funding type filter. Next slide, please. Opportunities by agency, as I said, there's 11 federal agencies as part of this interagency working group. And here we have just sort of a status update of what's open and planned, sort of the most actionable funding opportunities, screening out the already closed ones for the current period. And of course, the infrastructure bill will add a whole nother wave on top of this, but this is kind of currently as is. And I just wanted to flag just a couple of representative examples. Appalachian Regional Commission, they have multiple programs, just one sort of flagship program, particularly for energy communities, the POWER program that many of you have heard of, assists coal-impacted communities with a wide range of services. Department of Commerce, you're going to hear later from Courtney Haynes on all of their offerings through the Economic Development Agency. And here we've given an example of their Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, a highly flexible program. DOE, here's the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, but in fact, DOE has loan guarantees across a wide range of authorities from fossil to nuclear, manufacturing, etc. Interior, lots of exciting programs, particularly with the infrastructure bill coming up around abandoned mine lands. They have 2 ongoing programs, one, their regular AML program on reclamation, and also one that's called the AMLR, where they add an ER for economic revitalization, formerly the AML-ER pilot program. So some exciting programs there. DOL, they have a work program, so specifically workforce training, but they also have, importantly, dislocated worker grants, which states can trigger to provide workers with additional support in times of a transition event. Jumping down Treasury, big program funded through the ARP, the State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI, again, a state mediated program where states, in fact, have already submitted their initial applications and now are going through the process of updating their final proposals, which require input actually from stakeholders within their states. Certain intermediaries, such as financial institutions, can provide really important service and funding to support small businesses and entrepreneurship and create that economic activity really in a bottoms-up way. And then last on the table, you're going to hear a little bit later by Deputy Undersecretary Justin Maxson from USDA, a really large number of programs through the Rural Development Organization. So now we're going to watch a little video of how to use this tool. So if the team could get that started.
Welcome. This video is going to teach you how to find and access federal funding opportunities for energy communities. This new, easy-to-use, centralized clearinghouse is a targeted resource to help energy communities find information on federal assistance and direct users to federal websites for additional information. Getting started is easy. There are multiple ways to access the clearinghouse: energycommunities.gov, energycommunities.gov/funding, or search Energy Communities Clearinghouse on your preferred web browser. When you land on energycommunities.gov, one of the first things you will see is a large yellow button inviting you to explore the funding clearinghouse. Click this to access the database. If you access the clearinghouse by visiting energycommunities.gov/funding, that will take you directly to the database. The database is where you will find nearly 100 grants, loans, and other funding opportunities for qualifying communities. You can filter by your eligibility, your program purpose, and by the type of funding you seek for your community. You can even filter by opportunities that are open or those that are planning to open soon. Once you find an opportunity that's right for you, simply click the hyperlink, and the next page provides you with key information to help in submitting your application. Open and close date, detailed description of the opportunity, eligible recipients, amount limits per applicant, a contact if there are questions or concerns, and much more. Click Go to Application to learn how to apply. Most funding opportunities will have more detailed information on the application page. Read and follow that information closely. Remember, you can always reach out with questions to the contact listed on the opportunity. And it's that easy to find and access funding opportunities. Let's do that one more time. This time, we will sort by opportunities that are currently open and that are grants with no match. Let's select the Reconnect program. Here, we see more details on the Reconnect program, including its open and close date, eligible recipients, program purpose, and more. Again here, much more detail is found on the application page. Be sure to read everything available before applying. New funding opportunities are made available frequently. Always check back for new funding opportunities to help revitalize America's energy communities. Hopefully, this demonstration on how to access federal funding opportunities for energy communities was helpful. Please stay in touch with the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization by finding us online. You can also stay up to date by signing up for update emails straight to your inbox.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Hopefully that was useful. And next, we're going to hear a little bit from our special guest from our federal agency partners. I'd like to introduce Courtney Haynes from the Department of Commerce's Economic Development Agency. Courtney is the Coal Communities Coordinator, and she manages a $300 million Coal Communities commitment by EDA through their ARP program, but also more broadly to help connect with energy communities and coordinate a wide range of services and support that EDA offers. Additionally, we have Deputy Undersecretary Justin Maxson, uniquely situated with an overview across all of rural development's programs, many different programs offering a wide range of services, many of which are really targeted to energy communities. And so with that, first up, we have Justin. Would you like to join us and just say a few words about USDA?
It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. I have to say that's an exciting a resource. I don't think there's anything that is more important to us than ensuring that our programs hit the ground in a way that are useful. So just real quick, USDA Rural Development is one of the leading federal agencies that helps rural communities grow and prosper. We've got a loan portfolio about $230 billion that aims at advancing economic opportunity in rural communities, and over about 450 offices across the country aimed at helping rural communities access our staff toward connecting them with our programs. So we do a range of things, including improving high-speed internet access. We help provide affordable rural housing. We do workforce development support. We invest in its water systems and bridges, sewer systems. We help support small businesses. We do this through about 40 programs, both grant and loan, often in partnership with local communities and organizations. We help provide the tools and the resources toward that economic prosperity. So I'm going to share a list of programs, but I want to start with some advice that I think, in my mind, is slightly more helpful. One is just a recommendation, which is you take the time to build a relationship with your local rural development office. I can share a few insights today about our programs, but they will be able to really match our programs with your needs. And so I'm going to drop a link in the chat that takes you to our, I can figure out how to do it, to our state offices. Well, if you go to USDA.gov/rural development, you'll get to our state offices, and take the time to connect to the office that is closest with you, and they'll help you really figure out the programs that are the most applicable to your interests. So I'm going to drop that link in there. Two, strong applications to us often involve other partners, whether that's local banks or nonprofit organizations or educational institutions. Lots of other local nonprofits and local officials have experience with our program, so it's worth taking the time to talk to some of your other local partners. Often local community foundations are willing to provide small grants to help you access a grant writer or a consultant. So ask around. And then finally, some of our applications are not easy or short. And I would just say, if you're interested, definitely starting today before it's a short term, you're up against a deadline is a key thing. So lots of energy communities obviously are rural communities. We toured our work with the IWG looked last year and invested $2.3 billion in energy communities around infrastructure, around housing, around small business support. So I'm going to touch on some of those programs and just give you a few deadlines. And again, my overall recommendation is take the time to find a local office and build a relationship with that staff, and they can help connect you to our programs and provide some of that application support. That's so important as you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's on an actual application. So the Reconnect program is a grant and loan program, also guarantees, that are about expanding high-speed internet access in rural communities. It's a great program. We just got almost $2 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure law. It comes with some technical assistance to help rural communities. We're currently accepting our third round of Reconnect applications, and there's about $1 billion available in financing. That is a billion with a B. How can your community apply? You can be a nonprofit or a for-profit. Often a local rural telecoms apply, a local government, a federally recognized a tribe, an ISP, or another nonprofit. We have an application deadline of February 22nd. This is one of those, if you aren't already thinking about that application, you should probably start tonight. Another one, obviously, healthcare is critical to rural communities as an economic driver, but obviously also the provision of healthcare itself. We have an open program now called the Emergency Rural. It's healthcare grants. They provide support for addressing COVID and other problems related to the pandemic from a health perspective, but it also can bring new health access to your communities. So it can increase things like telehealth or mental health opportunities. And those applications are being accepted until the funds are exhausted. We have a new food supply chain, a guaranteed loan program. It's an investment we're trying to make in building a more resilient food supply chain. It will provide guarantee loans to expand its meat and poultry processing capacity and finance other parts of the food supply chain. There's about $1 billion available, again, in guarantees, and we're accepting applications now until all of that funding is expended. There's a smaller program, but an exciting one called the Rural Energy Pilot Program. This is to help energy communities develop renewable energy that also prioritizes economic opportunity and aims to support equity, in that we're going to look particularly for communities that haven't been able to access our other energy support programs. It can go for things like energy planning and capacity building. It can support energy efficiency and weatherization. It also can be used to install and equip community scale renewables. That could be a wind, a solar, a biomass, a geothermal. We'll make grants of, it's a $10 million pool with grants of up to $2 million. And the deadline for that is April the 19th. So I'm gonna stop there and just say I'm a little bit of broken record about this, but we've got 45 programs. And take the time to build that relationship with a local RD office and staffer, and they can help you navigate those 45 programs as you think about the opportunities in your community. We are incredibly committed to the work of the IWG because we're incredibly committed to helping energy communities who have invested in the electrification and the support of energy production in this country for decades, and we are here to partner in that that new economic future. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks, Justin, and I will welcome Courtney. Courtney, I know you come from an energy community and a family of that, and this is really is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. So why don't you just share a little bit with us what's going on at EDA?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, thanks, Briggs, and thanks, Justin. Thanks for inviting me here today, and for everyone that's taking time out of your day, thank you. As Briggs mentioned, I'm the Coal Communities Coordinator here at EDA, which is with the U.S. Department of Commerce. Can we advance to the next slide, please? Before diving into the coal-related grant opportunities, I did want to pull it up a little bit and give a brief overview of EDA and our foundational principles. Our mission, as you can see, is to lead the federal economic development agenda by promoting innovation and competitiveness. At its core, EDA hopes to help communities with their own defined economic development goals that is community-led to progress more resilient local economies. Really, what that simply means is we do not have a prescription top-down model. Next slide. These are EDA's investment priorities. These really serve as guideposts of where your project alignment might be. They're supposed to be an overarching framework of our investment portfolio. So if you're considering applying to any EDA funding opportunity, understand the investment priorities set by EDA where your project might sit. Two I want to call out in particular is the recovery and resilience. That's planning and implementation projects that build economic resilience to and long-term recovery from economic shocks. So here, it's a lot of those experienced by coal and power plant communities. The second is equity. Equity is a key priority here at EDA, and how we define that is development or implementation projects that advance equity across America through investments that directly benefit one or more traditionally underserved populations or underserved communities within geographies that have been systemically denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic prosperity. So think of tribal lands or persistent poverty counties. And lastly, rural areas with demonstrated historical underservice. Next slide. Really quickly, just wanted to reflect EDA eligible applicants. These can somewhat change across our notice of fundings, but generally they do include this list below. I just want to note we do not fund any private entities. Next slide. So how do we even define a coal community here at EDA? Coal communities are communities and regions that can reasonably demonstrate how changes in the coal economy have resulted or are anticipated to result in job loss and layoffs in any coal-reliant commercial sector. In general, EDA will consider application for projects in communities and regions where the primary coal contraction event, so think of a closure of a coal mine or a coal-fired power plant or closure of various coal economy supply chain businesses, took place within 15 years of the application submission date. So you're talking about a pretty broad definition at this point. Also, we do not have any predefined list of coal communities at EDA. Next slide. Okay, so you've been hanging on. Now we're getting to the good stuff here at EDA. So what funding opportunities actually exist? First, EDA continuously funds coal communities year over year through our regular appropriations. For example, in fiscal year 2021, we awarded approximately $33.5 million through our Assistance to Coal Communities program. Coal communities are also eligible for other EDA funding streams, and many received awards, for example, under our Public Works program. I'm going to be talking about those year-over-year programs in just a bit. What we're really excited about is the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan has allowed us to provide even more funding to support these communities. So EDA is implementing a $3 billion initiative, and these programs under the American Rescue Plan are meant to be designed around accelerating the economic recovery from COVID and also building local economies that will be resilient to future economic shock. Of that $3 billion, $300 million has been committed to coal communities. So here is our coal communities commitment. As I mentioned, $300 million to ensure support for these communities as they recover from the pandemic and create new jobs and opportunities. This commitment is being fulfilled in two grant programs. The first, $100 million through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, and then $200 million in additional economic adjustment assistance grants. Funding through Build Back Better, however, has already closed. We're already into phase 1 of program implementation. We were excited to see that close to 70 of the initial Build Back Better applicants were from coal communities, with 12 applicants becoming finalists, which is about 20% of the phase 1 winners. Therefore, the current opportunity of this $300 million is really within this $200 million of the economic adjustment assistance grants. Next slide. So any project that will create jobs or contribute to a community's or region's economic recovery is eligible with this funding. It is actually really flexible. EDA can fund a wide range of project types. We can do infrastructure like broadband or water or sewer or roadway. We can also do building constructions, revolving loan funds, and technical assistance. Next slide. The deadline for submission is coming up. So you got March 31st, 2022. However, funds will mostly start moving pretty quickly over the next 2 months because the application has been open since July and it's been a rolling submission. So we encourage submissions really as soon as possible. If you're not already working with EDA's state economic development representatives, which shorthand we call EDRs, please reach out to them to either initiate the process or strengthen your proposal. Next slide. So I'm going to move us on from this $300 million coal communities commitment via the American Rescue Plan and just highlight our annual EDA coal funding opportunities. So the first is our regular Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, which I know can be a little confusing. So we have our American Rescue Plan, EAA, and then we have our regular EAA program that happens year over year. The typical grant award is anywhere between $150,000 to $1 million, and grant rates range between 50 and 80% of the full program budget. However, again, applicants should speak to your state EDRs to understand what the specific grant rate might be, given your community's level of distress. Also very similar to what I just mentioned with the American Rescue Plan EAA, really flexible as far as how this funding can be used. Next slide. So now we have our Assistance to Coal Communities program that I was mentioning before. For ACC funding, projects must be located within and targeted communities or regions that have been impacted or can reasonably demonstrate that you'll be impacted by coal mining or coal power plant employment loss. For ACC, the federal grant rate is about at 80%. That is, all applicants are potentially eligible for an 80% grant rate. But EDA has discretion based on the relative distress of the project region and the project merits. Typically, for these project amounts, you can have $500,000 to $2 million for implementation projects and $100,000 to $350,000 for planning. And these applications are accepted on a rolling basis throughout the year. Next slide. So up next is our local technical assistance program, which is a really important one. It really can prevent costly mistakes and misguided investments. These are a bit smaller. They're typically about less than $200,000 as far as grant awards. And again, applications are well accepted on a rolling basis. Often a lot of our grantees who are pursuing local technical assistance are really just starting off, really trying to figure out kind of what's the opportunity and what's the regional need. Next slide. And our last funding opportunity that's open and for the presentation today is our Public Works program. The Public Works program, we provide investments to help distressed communities build, design, or engineer critical infrastructure and facilities that will implement regional development strategies. So these are a pretty broad range here. Typical project amount can go from $600,000 all the way up to $3 million. And again, same. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis. So right now, just to summarize, our American Rescue Plan, those deadlines for economic adjustments, that is due March 31st. Our other broader coal programming is accepted on a rolling basis. Next slide. All right, so what to do? What to do if you have any interest in any of these opportunities? One is read the notice of fundings associated with these opportunities and understand if there might be alignment. Two, find your economic development district for planning support and technical assistance. You might ask, what is that? We call them EDDs here at EDA, or economic development districts. They're multi-jurisdictional entities, commonly composed of multiple counties and in some cases even cross state borders. They help lead locally based, regionally driven economic development planning process to establish a strategic blueprint. So you can think of it as kind of a local economic development roadmap for regional collaboration. And I'm similar to Justin and what he just said. Truly, the most important takeaway from this presentation I want to make is that if you aren't already in contact with your state's economic development representative, reach out to them. And right here, eda.gov/contact, they are a wealth of knowledge, and they're there to help you navigate the resources and also understand alignment to EDA's investment priorities so that you can submit a strong proposal. As you can see here from this map, while EDA has a headquartered staff in Washington, D.C., we have 6 regional offices across the country and hundreds of field staff. So again, really access them. They're there to help. And because we're not a top-down organization, we want to hear from you and what your ideas are. Each of these funding opportunities that I reviewed today are highlighted on the Interagency Working Group's Clearinghouse. They make it really, really easy to find. All of ours is under the U.S. Department of Commerce. If you find them and click around, it will take you to an overview page and then also take you directly to grants.gov to get started. I will also drop my email into the chat. It's chaynes@eda.gov if anybody has any questions. But we're really looking forward to the work ahead and want to thank you again for being here today.
I want to thank Courtney and Justin for those great overviews, and for our audience, you heard a lot of really good actionable tips for getting started. I heard learn the programs, read the NOFOs or RFPs or FOAs or whatever they are, start early, partner, either to get cost sharing support, to get grant writing support, to strengthen your applications, get to know your EDDs, as Courtney said, and meet the field staff, whether that's an EDA, EDR, in the case of USD, someone in their state office, or many of the other field staff. DOE has national labs, ARC has lots of partners on the ground. A lot of these agencies have field staff. Really encourage you to get to know them and share your thoughts and ask questions and get engaged. What a great way to sort of bring the clearinghouse to life here today, as well as give you some actionable tips for getting started. So encourage you to do that. Courtney, I wanted to put you on the spot a little bit with sort of some follow-up questions. We get a lot of questions about the match requirements, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Can you just help us understand from EDA's perspective? In general, we hear from coal communities that match is really difficult to come by, and I know that I believe there's a sliding scale for EDA. So can you just unpack that a little bit for us so that everybody's clear?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a great question and an important one. So match requirements, they generally vary because grant rates can be between 50 and 80%, meaning the amount that we would award. So for the American Rescue Plan, our programs, that baseline is at 80% of the grant rate. So you would have to get a 20% match. But there's also possibility of a higher grant rate for communities that are particularly distressed. For assistance to coal communities, all applicants qualify for a grant rate up to 80%. And then for public works, for our regular economic adjustment assistance, and for local technical assistance, the grant rate really does vary based on the relative economic distress and needs of the project region. So again, it's kind of emphasized, consult your EDR in your state because they'll help kind of understand where you might be. And for example, tribes, they always qualify for 100% of grant rate. So there is some flexibility. Also, sometimes we'll get the question of, do you have any advice on getting matching funds? We've seen some communities, they're able to get matching funds from employer investments, or they're able to leverage some private philanthropy, and in some cases through other federal agencies. But again, remember that the grants rates do vary, and also we do take into account the level of distress the community is in, and also the merits of the project itself.
Hey, thanks for that. And I saw we had a question come in. Does EDA fund private entities? And I think I heard you that you do not.
We do not.
Thanks, Hannah, for the question, and encourage others. If you have any more questions for Courtney or myself, let us know. While we're waiting for additional questions to come in, Courtney, I was going to ask, if you're a stakeholder, a community representative that's looking at this clearinghouse or looking at just EDA's portfolio, and you're saying, well, it looks like there's a few different funding opportunities here that might be right for the kind of support I need. Like, how should I figure out which one to do? And should I submit like multiple applications? What kind of advice would you give them there?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, I guess I am now a broken record too. Consult your EDR because they will help you identify the one that is most aligned to your program and what you're trying to achieve. So they'll help you make that decision. But as a kind of practicality speaking, we really do discourage submitting an application to multiple notice of fundings. EDA will only consider projects under a single notice of funding. So if multiple applications are submitted, well, they'll actually be consolidated under one notice of funding. So it's also just kind of not worth it for someone to do a lot of different applications because they would be consolidated. So instead, really pick the program. Remember what I said about those investment, our investment priorities. See what aligns the most, make your case, work with your EDR on your application, and submit one really strong proposal.
Hey, that's great. We got a couple more questions here. One I thought that might be useful would be sort of Eric's question, what's the most important part of an application to the EDA? And I was thinking back, you listed your investment priorities earlier. Maybe you want to, I don't know if you can clarify, like what's the relationship between the investment priorities and how EDA views an application?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different components to an application and they're all of value. I would say the applications that really stand out and increase the odds of receiving funding are the ones that demonstrate a really strong link between the proposed EDA project and future job creation. Those are always the strongest. So, what type of jobs is it going to create? Are they sustainable? And is there going to be advancement? Also, applications for projects that serve highly distressed communities or that further EDA's equity goals that I had defined earlier. So that includes rural, that includes persistent poverty counties. Those are also really highly competitive. So you want to track it back to the investment priorities for sure. And then also in the notice of funding, we do list out the criteria, that we're going to be reviewing these application against. And so you really want to align to that. You want to kind of meet that and think of it as a checklist and get your supporting evidence. And so I would say follow the notice of funding and what we're looking for. And again, really build your case as it relates to job creation. And if it does hit on equity, really emphasize that and also provide that same level of evidence.
Courtney, you've done an excellent job on the hot seat here. Thank you so much for answering our questions. I see that you have a few more in the chat, but we're running short on time. So if possible, I'm going to encourage you to put some answers in the chat there. If not, maybe you can follow up later. And I want to turn it back over to our Executive Director, Brian Anderson, to close us out.
Well, first, I'd like to offer another thanks, yet another thanks to Courtney and Justin and Briggs. As those of you can tell, it is such a great pleasure to be able to work with folks like Courtney and Justin across all the agencies. Their heart's in it. They're dedicated to making sure that the communities across the country in our coal power plant and energy communities across the country see the economic revitalization. And one thing great about the USDA and EDA is two particular examples is the footprint that we have across the country. The economic development districts, the USDA also has footprints across the country that includes all of our coal power plant and energy communities. And so it is a really great opportunity to get for those who are on this call learning about funding opportunities to get into touch with your federal counterparts who have footprint around the country. And so, as you can see here on the screen, we want some feedback from you. We want you to tell us what you think. If you've had a chance to try out the Funding Clearinghouse, maybe even while we were here in the last hour, or since we rolled it out earlier or late in the last calendar year, if you've had a chance to use it, how would you rate it? We have some poll questions that are open. You can see it'll be open for about two and a half more minutes. What else would you like to see as the IWG builds on this clearinghouse? And as we continue to work on and evolve a one-stop shop for energy communities, what would you, as a practitioner, as a private sector or government, local government official, what would you want to see in a federal clearinghouse for energy communities around the country? We would like some feedback on this webinar. How is it helpful, and what additional support would you need to successfully pursue federal funds? And this is a bit of a leading question. We know over the past year, all of our stakeholder engagement, one of our top topics that we keep coming back to, and we are dedicated to finding the right solution, is the capacity building in communities around the country. We know that one of the major challenges for communities that need economic revitalization is having the bandwidth and the expertise and the time and resources to be able to pursue and put together the top quality applications for federal funding, or even be able to put together a roadmap or a pathway for economic revitalization. So there's about 30 seconds left on the poll. If you could, again, please tell us what you think about our clearinghouse, what we should put in the clearinghouse, how you would rate this webinar, and what other support you need to access federal funding. To give you a little bit of a preview, as many of you or most of you would be aware of, the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed last calendar year. There's more than $100 billion of infrastructure investments and funding opportunities that our interagency working group agencies are working on implementation today, literally today across all of the agencies. And these include transportation infrastructure in rural communities, broadband access and deployment, we know key to the future economy is broadband access. And many of our coal power plants and energy communities around the country do not have the access to broadband that they would need to participate in the 21st century economy. Of course, abandoned mine lands are around the country. There's $11 billion of investment in the infrastructure bill to address abandoned mine lands. Briggs highlighted some of that earlier on. Plugging orphaned and abandoned wells is another key driver to both tackling the climate crisis with leaking methane out of these orphaned and abandoned wells, as well as providing opportunities for near-term jobs and to be able to plug these orphaned and abandoned wells to convert that land, just like in abandoned mine land opportunities, to convert the land into viable economic opportunities. The last two, in critical materials and rare earth elements, certainly at NATL, this is part of our research portfolio, but we know in the future supply chains of everything from electronics to the renewable sector, critical materials and rare earth elements are key, and they can be found in many of our mine wastes, acid mine drainage, and things like that around the country is another key area, as well as access to clean water, as Justin mentioned, key components of the long-standing programs in USDA and other federal agencies, making sure that communities have access to clean water, and that is a key component to economic revitalization. So we're going to continue updating the Clearinghouse. We're going to update it with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the funding opportunities that once the detailed plans are available from each of our agency partners, they will be on the Clearinghouse, and we will be highlighting them there. We go to the next slide. I want to preview some upcoming workshops we have next month. In February, we're going to have another workshop on funding opportunities for energy communities in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to highlight some of these key ones. I've already mentioned plugging orphan abandoned wells, abandoned mine lands, and broadband. There are many others, and so we're going to have a workshop specifically on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And in March, repurposing fossil assets. As coal plants are retiring around the country, they leave a legacy and an infrastructure in place that can be repurposed for future economic revitalization. One particular example is an announcement late last year by TerraPower to build a nature plant in Wyoming. There are many other opportunities of how we can leverage the infrastructure that's in place of today's fossil assets as we look into the future, not just the abandoned mine lands, but the power plants and even possibly refineries looking far into the future as well. So we're going to have a workshop on opportunities for repurposing fossil energy assets. And so if we go to the next slide, we always like to have a call to action for those of you who are participating today, and it really comes back to the stakeholder feedback. We cannot do what we want to do in providing the economic development opportunities in our coal power plants and energy communities around the country unless we hear from those on the ground, because there is no silver bullet. There is no one answer for revitalization of the communities across the country. And so we need to know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And so please do familiarize yourself with the Funding Clearinghouse, try it out, send us your thoughts, and sign up at the website, follow our social media, keep attending our webinars and workshops. And then as we look forward to the significant funding opportunities from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, start cultivating coalitions around the communities and identifying the community's pathway into the future. Start assembling the resources for grant writing, because this is about deployment of lots and lots of infrastructure around the country, everything from roads to bridges to broadband to water systems. And when necessary, start building these coalitions to help secure matching funds. And some of this effort is going on in state legislatures around the country. Some examples of legislatures that are putting together matching funds, and even in the private sector and in philanthropy. The philanthropic interests around the country are putting together funds to assist in everything from capacity building to assistance in grant writing. And so we take it upon ourselves to help connect the dots, help bring communities to those other entities. But please start getting ready, because those funding opportunities from the infrastructure law are about to start rolling out. So we look forward to seeing you in a webinar next month on the infrastructure law, and then on repurposing fossil assets in March. So again, you can find us at energycommunities.gov. Our clearinghouse is energycommunities.gov/funding. You can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. We're trying to put all the tools in your hands, because we know that those of you on this webinar who are interested in funding opportunities from the IWG, it's you who are going to make the difference in those communities. So we're here to help. So with that, I thank you all for attending. I thank all of our panelists and those who helped organize this, and have a great day.